Well, hey there, friends. How's everybody doing today? It's a beautiful sunny day here. Not a worry in the world when you're in your own backyard, even if it looks like a jungle behind me. It's just a few plants, of course. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and let me just say that the land out here is rugged, very rugged. And even though population has encroached upon basically every natural area out there, there are still some mysterious zones that are yet to be investigated. And even though humans may have tread on most acres of land on Earth, it doesn't mean that they're tread very often. And there are always new discoveries being made about things that live in the jungle or live in the woods. I would say we have the Pacific Northwest has the Olympics, which is the Olympic National Park is in the Olympic Mountains there. They're a very unique range, and they're different than the surrounding. The geology is unique there, but the forests are extremely dense. However, all the way from Canada, from Alaska, all the way actually down to California, Northern California, it's nothing but miles and thousands of square miles of just forest upon forest. And if you've ever taken an airplane, you'd see exactly just how small the cities really look in comparison to these forests. Now, I grew up here, so I'm used to it. I go camping, I feel safe in the woods. As a disclaimer here, first, I've been watching way too many stories lately. Mr. Ballin, if you know who that is, then you know exactly where I'm coming from and where I'm going here with this discussion. If you're not familiar, he's just a YouTuber who talks about mysteries and legends, and there's actually David Paulides is an author of a book called Missing 411. Now, I've never been completely enamored with this whole missing persons cases in the woods. However, that's all not because I don't think it happens. I know it happens. But a lot of these unique circumstances are very easily explainable. One example is that over and over, when people disappear into the woods, if it's a cold out, let's say, they'll find them well out of the search area, and they'll say, how could they get this far? And then before they find the person, they will find their shoes or their boots, usually set with their clothes folded next to it, their clothing folded up or set out, and then them nowhere to be found. Then they might find them miles down the trail with no shoes, with no coat, nothing. And it would lead people to wonder, like, what kind of a mystery would lead somebody to do this, especially as many people as do that. And there's a very simple answer. When you get to the late stages of hypothermia and you're really cold, there's a point of no return. And there's a point where your body takes, I can't recall the actual, it's hyperthermic, I think it's paradoxal hyperthermia. Sounds right. And it's basically where you think that you're really hot because your skin and your nerves are giving you this last rush of the feeling of heat and your last boost of adrenaline to try to get you to safety when you're about to freeze. So people will run for miles and miles naked sometimes and be found without any clothes on at all. So people have been known to strip out of their clothes and do that. And the reason they can be found so far away is because of the adrenaline rush. But there are some cases that are very unique and make you wonder. And I'm not here to talk about the specific cases because there's too many and it would go far too much into detail. But another video I was going to make here was about why do we love these dark stories? Why do they move us so much? Why do we get so addicted to hearing about disappearances? Because it's fascinating. And there are some cases out there, especially of some of the most well-studied ones are the hunters who disappear into the woods. And now look, I'll tell you my story here first. When I was a kid, and I don't remember this, by the way, I was out with my family, I believe, near Estacada, which is kind of out on the border of the woods, and there's woods everywhere out here. And somehow I disappeared from the picnic, and apparently I got lost in the woods. And they sent out people to search for me, and they'd been looking for me. I don't know how many hours I was gone, but apparently, from what I'm told, I just walked back out of the woods at one point. And when I was asked what happened, I said, well, I got lost for a while, and then they said, well, how'd you get back? And I said, apparently this is what I said. I looked down at my feet and I told them, I said, happy feet, take me home. And so that line always kind of stuck with me. It's pretty funny to think of myself saying that at that age. I was probably 5, 6, who knows, 7. I don't even know. But it's since then, as a kid, of course, when I got together with my wife when we were in our early 20s, we went up to Mount Hood, and Mount Hood is a pretty well-traveled area, right? I mean, the roads are well known, everything within earshot of the lodge, basically. It has a road that goes right over the mountain by the lodges there, so it's a well-used mountain. And we turned down this well-known road that goes kind of by this river and lake area, but I don't recall the name of it. I think it was actually Trillium Lake, maybe. But we went down this rough road and found a trail, and we started going down it, and somehow, along this hike, just down this random trail, we realized the trail looked a lot smaller. Somehow we'd gotten off the main trail and onto a secondary game trail. And we thought, well, that's okay. We'll just follow it down, see where it goes. Well, then we tried to go down further, and it got smaller and smaller until it disappeared. And we tried to backtrack. Next thing we know, we're down at the river in this boulder field. And I will admit I was panicking a little bit. Even though it was the middle of the day, it was the summer, I was like, okay, how are we going to do this? Eventually we cross country and we found the trail. Boom, went back, found our car. But that's not always the case. And when some people get lost, they really get lost. My wife and I talk about, we were talking, she always mentions the laser thing. If you're going to hike, carry a laser. It's like one of the simplest things a person can carry to, you can shine them at planes at night. I mean, it's about the only way, if you don't have a fire going, to, signal a plane. But, it's such an easy thing for people to carry. But it's not just that. It's like a lot of hikers, and these people consider themselves purists, if you will, they want to go with the bare minimum. They don't want to take anything extra. They're ounce counters, as they call themselves. And it's about the very lightest, amount of stuff you can carry, which is great for certain treks. But when you're walking into a storm, like a lot of these people do, and you know better, when people have invested so much time in these hiking trips, it can be very expensive to change your plans. So they just go with it. But more than the cost, I think it's the stubborn nature of mankind. I mean, look, we climb to the top of Mount Everest. In my opinion, that's not something to be celebrated. I think it's stupid. That's just me, though. I don't think anybody who climbs to the top of a mountain is a hero. I think that, they made a decision that they wanted to get that notoriety. Fine, good for them. But there's nothing, amazing about that. It's like you just put your life at risk. And it's especially bothersome when people put themselves at extreme risk in situations where they go out during a storm and try to go rock climbing or whatever it might be, when they have children at home, for example. But if you're a single guy and you want to go out and just, take risks, go for it. But it was just kind of a side note. I've noticed a lot of people, it's really, the outdoorsman type people are extremely into whatever they're into. And I'm an outdoorsman, so I understand that. But I'm not a, quote, hunter, and I'm not a fisherman, even though I don't hunt, I do love to fish. And I haven't hunted yet, but I might one day. I'd like to, eventually learn. I mean, I know how to shoot, but the point being that being out in nature for me, I really revere nature for what it is. Okay? I mean, when I'm out in the woods, I feel at home. For some people, if they were put into some of the places I've been to, it might panic them. I've thought about this. It's the same way I would feel about going deep diving in caves. When people are cave divers, I mean, like the mortality rate of cave divers who do the extreme class 3, dives is high. I mean, you're pretty much guaranteeing you're going to at least die or know somebody who dies. Because it's just dangerous as hell, and that's not my thing. I do like taking risks, but for me, being out in nature is what I'm after, right? I love the desert, the high desert. I love the middle of the deep, dark woods. And I've never once been afraid of the woods themselves. Never have I actually felt panicked out in the woods. There have been a couple times where the hair stood up on the back of my neck, but I've been to some interesting places, and I still always like to travel with someone else. It's always a good sign. But you make sure you don't get picked off, right? But are there creatures in the woods? A good example is, and I should bring this up since I'm talking about it. What about Sasquatch? Now, when you say that, you get mixed feelings. In the past, I used to believe in Sasquatch. Then for a while, I said, well, he may have existed at one time, but there's probably none left. And I'll go back and forth. And, at one point, I was like, after hearing enough stories and statistics, I said, okay, if a small community of some primate that's existed here for thousands of years, perhaps, is able to conceal themselves, how hard would that be? And you start looking at the numbers, and you start looking at how many black bears. As when I went hiking, I saw a black bear on the trail. I wanted to see a black bear on the trail. But bears want to come to the trail because it's easier for them. Plus, a lot of them interact with the humans at the campgrounds. So at Glacier Park, I was walking along, look up 100 feet away, there's a black bear just standing in the trail looking at me. Now, that's a rare experience, depending on where you go. You don't see bears every day. I mean, some places you do if you're hiking all the time out there in Glacier Park. But the point is, you never find a black bear skeleton when you're walking in the woods. And I like to walk in the deep woods, just cut into the woods, and you just don't find skeletons like that. Most things either get eaten up or buried, but covered up by vegetation. But the idea that if a conscious, intelligent creature like a Sasquatch does still exist in the woods out here, their numbers are going to be far lower than black bears. Far lower. I mean, what, a percentage point, if that? And then you have to consider that they might bury their own dead. I'll never go as far as to say that they're interdimensional creatures or that they're aliens. I don't need to fit that into it. Just because of the fact that they appear as primates to people, whether it's true or not, I still don't dismiss all of the cases as bogus. And especially when you go back to the late 1800s to the early 1900s, when the gold rush was going on, when people were moving up to Alaska and into Northern California, there are some crazy stories of dudes being attacked in cabins, rocks being thrown at them by these tall, hairy creatures that are difficult to see. And hey, the mind is fallible. Often we think we see things we don't. But that just means that not all of the cases can just be frauds and hoaxsters, like a lot of them are today. I mean, plenty of guys get dressed up in a gorilla suit and go running across the freeway, I'm sure. You know what I mean? There actually was a guy who did that a while back. But people just want to have fun with these theories and these be part of a legend if they can create a fake film. In fact, the most common and most popular cited video ever of the Bigfoot or Sasquatch is the Wright-Patterson film from the 1960s, which they said that they were determined to go out and capture something that they'd seen, and then they saw it walk across a creek bed, and it's the one where you see it kind of walk behind the trees across the creek and out of sight. The dude's neighbor, one of the guys who created the film, his neighbor claims that he hired him to help to wear the costume, and the other guy denies it. They're these two old guys, and they found out they were neighbors after all these years. They didn't even know, and they constantly, they don't even talk to each other now, but they both debate each other's stories. One guy's saying that he was part of a faking of a Sasquatch film. Why would he lie about that, right? But the other guy's saying, no, the Sasquatch film is real. Well, why would he lie about that? Well, he has good reason to, because he doesn't want to ruin his image or his reputation. So the point of this is it's hard to get to the bottom of the truth. It's the same with UFO stuff, which, about the only strange thing, one of the strangest experiences that I've had in the woods was with my oldest son. A few years ago, we were sitting in the woods and watching the stars late at night, and we were watching the satellites pass by, and once in a while an airplane. And all of a sudden, a light came up from the south, and at first I thought it looked like a satellite, but it wasn't traveling the normal trajectory, which is west to east that I see the satellites travel, and also it was much brighter, and it was just something unique about it. And it came up from the south, and it just kind of stopped. And my son and I looked at each other like, did you see that? He's like, yeah, it stopped. What the hell's going on there? We're thinking drone, helicopter? No, it's too far up, but it's too consistent of a light, and it's very unique. And then it all of a sudden starts to move in an ant-like pattern. And we were like, oh my, what the hell is it? It looked like an ant searching for something, for food, the way it was moving. And we were like, are we really seeing this? I thought, well, what is that? And we watched it for another second, and then I said, we joked like, come on down here, or aliens. And all of a sudden it got really bright, as if it was coming closer. And we kind of laughed. We're like, no, because the moment was kind of intense. There was a weird emotion with it. And we're like, no, never mind. And then it went dim again. And then it sat there for a second, and then it just traveled over our heads out of our field of sight. And that was it. That was the experience. And was it an orb, a UFO? Was it just a military drone from the military base right over the mountain? Well, it's actually quite a ways, but still, all the questions that arise, I'm a rational person. I try to always find a rational answer. And it's not to ruin the fun or because I wouldn't rather believe in something else. It's the same reason that I kind of wish that I was, did believe in some of these truths that others do, because it's more fun to believe in, I guess, myths and legends than to be like, I'm a skeptic about this. And everybody's like, you're just ruining all the fun, It's like, no. I just want to, my only reason for picking apart the bullshit is to get to the truth. And some of these stories can be true, and some others not be true. And that's okay. But I'm going to guess that something lives in the woods out here. And on a final note, I heard a story the other day about somebody who got a tortoise when they were young. And they really wanted this tortoise, and they loved it, had it for a little bit, and then it disappeared one day. And the door had been open, and the family looked everywhere, couldn't find it. So they said, well, it must be, what was it? You must have gone out the front door and gone into the woods, and they looked everywhere, and nobody could find it. 30 years passed. The father of the family had died, and the kids were cleaning out the house. They were moving some boxes. And all of a sudden, out of this old record player box climbs a tortoise. The same tortoise from 30 years before, that had been living in their storage closet in a box for 30 years. And you might ask, well, how did he eat? What did he drink? Apparently he was consuming the condensation that would form in the attic or wherever it was, and eating small termites and bugs. And he was able to live in a dormant type state for 30 years and still survived. Amazing story. And I lay that out because I think it's important to remember that there's genetics out there we don't understand, metabolisms and body processes. Some animals can cocoon themselves. I watched a video the other day of somebody digging out this dirt patch, a huge, dirt area to build something, and all of a sudden this it was like titled "Weird Creature Found in the Mud." And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, that's a lungfish. They're fish, but during dry times they can bore themselves down into the mud and go dormant for decades, apparently, until water comes and reanimates them. And I bring those stories, because who knows what kind of strange dormant creatures might exist on Earth. Think big. Think the Kraken. I'm joking, but I'm not at the same time. A lot of the stories, it's funny because a lot of the sci-fi stories of the 90s and 80s that I grew up on, they seemed outlandish at the time. But in retrospect, with the technology we have now, and knowing what we know about the natural world and what we can see in animals, I'm more likely to believe it's possible. A good example would be the zombie apocalypse, for example. People are like, oh, there's no such thing as zombies. Well, if you've ever seen how cordyceps work on ants, they're literally called zombie fungus because the spores land and explode on the exoskeleton of the ant, literally explode to penetrate the ant. Then they go into the bloodstream, they go to the brain, they take control and hijack the ant's brain, cause it to climb down to the forest floor, march down to a certain altitude, then climb up onto a short plant, go out to the edge of the branch, climb to the bottom of the leaf, grip that leaf, and then they die. And then the spores grow out, the cordyceps grow out of the ant's head, poof, spores fly out into the forest, and the whole process starts all over. Meaning that small creatures can control big creatures. And that part fascinates me as well. I would imagine some of the stories in the woods might be feral people, maybe even old tribes. Maybe some Native American tribes withdrew into the woods, centuries ago and just come across as these hairy creatures. Who fucking knows? Nobody has all the answers. But it's a fascinating topic, and one I think is worth delving into. When you walk out into the forest, how you feel is going to depend on who you are. I generally feel safe, but there's a certain notable feeling of silence once in a while, where the birds go silent, the insects go silent, you can't hear a sound. And that's probably the creepiest thing. So for the people that say, you hear creepy sounds in the woods, it's better than hearing no sounds at all. That's my thought. So thanks for listening. And as you can tell, I grew up on the X-Files and stuff like that. Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, and I loved it all. I've always been fascinated by the mysteries of the unknown. But in the last couple decades, I've been reluctant to even really talk about it with anybody, because people are either completely opposed to believing in the unknown, or they're so obsessed with it that they refuse to budge on anything. Say, no, this is a fact. These are aliens. These are creatures. And it's gotten so bad that there's humans telling you what every alien is and what species they are and what their intention is on Earth and how we connect with the Pleiadians. We've got channelers. I mean, the whole thing's just a joke. Complete joke. I don't believe any of these fools. But I do believe that there's some weird shit going on out there. And I've seen some weird stuff, but you don't always have to see something yourself to believe it. In fact, even if you see something, you shouldn't believe it, because your eyes are flipping the image to the back of your retina. That's being portrayed as an image onto your cells behind your eyes, which sends a signal to your brain, which reconstitutes it as an image. And you don't even know if you're living in reality anyway, so might as well have fun with it. Guess that's about all I got. Peace out. Talk to y'all next time. And have yourselves a wonderful day, wherever you might be.